with the long-range missiles, you have to remember that it's not just Russia, it's also China. The US needs as many long-range standoff strike weapons as possible for any potential war it tries to provoke with China. So we've been hearing about the JSOM air-launched cruise missiles. This was a centerpiece of a potential war with China. If they start sending them to Ukraine, they have none to spare for China. They don't have enough to go to war with China. If they start sending them to Ukraine, then they're basically ending this conflict with China before it even starts, before they even provoke it.
Yeah, and that's been a concern, I feel, since really the beginning of the arms problem that you have covered so much in detail, Brian. That ever since, I think we can trace this back, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, to that vaunted Ukrainian counteroffensive. Once that ran out of steam, and it was quite quick, actually, that it ran out of steam quite quick. After that, yeah, but even leading into that, there was all this concern about, well, how much aid do we give for a Ukrainian counteroffensive versus how little, how much. And then after that, it's been a big struggle, even though, of course, we know that Ukraine's been getting something. But what does that tell us then, Brian? If even now the reports are, the aid could run out at any point. It's going to run out next week. There may not be enough. Yet Ukraine, as Ukraine is bogged down in Russian territory. That's a huge escalation for such a dire problem. No.
Exactly. It made absolutely no sense. But again, if you just remember that even in Kiev, the whole point is to just string this out for as long as possible. They needed the PR points, I guess, more than they needed the manpower and weapons. I guess they feel like even though the front line is collapsing, think about it this way: the front line is collapsing in the Donbas region, and if they just kept all of their troops there, it would just keep collapsing, slowly collapsing. The price for Russia would be much lower than if they did this incursion into Russia and at least scored some PR points, boosted morale, and possibly got this to drag out even longer. Before the Kursk incursion, just think about all of the articles we were hearing about how, even in the Western media, how Ukraine is done, morale is destroyed, people have no hope of winning. And these were all things that we have all been saying since this all began, and we were called Russian propagandists for it. Then the Western media was reporting on this weekly, daily. And then the Kursk incursion helped give a boost, but it's entirely artificial. It is psychological, solely psychological. And what it has actually done is accelerate the actual crises behind the lack of morale that they were so worried about in the first place. So it's a lose-lose proposition no matter what they do. But what they're trying to do is keep it going for as long as possible and do as much damage as possible. The last concern that they have is of Ukraine itself. Its people, its territory, its military forces. That's the last thing they care about. They don't care about it at all, actually. And so this is something that they're willing to sacrifice to continue incurring as steep a price as possible for Russia. So we have to keep that in mind. We have to keep in mind that they're going to do the same thing with Taiwan and also the Philippines, also with Europe. I distinctively remember, this is something that I was wrong on. I had thought for sure that Europe was going to gradually continue working with Russia, continue working with China, because it served their best interest to do so. And any sort of continued subordination to the US was going to destroy Europe. But I was wrong, because they had politically captured the European government through the European Union. And the leadership there did not care about Europe's best interests. And they continued Europe's subordination to the United States. And now we see that this has begun destroying Europe itself. This whole conflict with Russia is destroying Europe. So it's not just Ukraine the US is willing to sacrifice. It is also Europe. They're willing to sacrifice everyone and everything to try to achieve this geopolitical objective.